We wanted to make sure we got really practical about what it looks like to serve at every age and how everybody can be utilized for the service of the Lord. It's so important that we recognize that every generation has something in them that they can do, even if it's small. We have to be more not so rigid in our thinking that if a child isn't baptized at 11, they can't work on a social media team. If a child isn't baptized, they can't do the announcements. Utilize your high schoolers. They understand technology. Even if they're not experts in it, they understand it because it's intuitive for them. There are ways that everybody in the community can actually serve, from the youngest, the 2-year-old, to the 92-year-old. Welcome to the People Growth Discipleship Podcast. Don't just grow your church, grow your people. I'm your host, Kendra Dublin, the pastor's ally, and this season's theme is intergenerational discipleship from the womb to the tomb. We will discuss various subtopics to aid church leaders and be a bridge for discipleship resources, partnerships, and strategies. If that sounds edifying to your walk with Christ and your congregation, then tune in. Hi everyone, it's Kendra Dublin, and we are back for another episode. And this particular podcast is Intergenerational Ministry Milestones, serving at every age. And so we wanted to make sure we got really practical about what it looks like to serve at every age and how everybody can be utilized for the service of the Lord. And so when I was thinking about this particular podcast, I was thinking about our youth day that we had earlier this year. We've been doing youth days for years now, for forever. But during that particular time, it was just encouraging to see the youth doing the different things in worship. And so I had decided to, afternoon, instead of going home, let me just hang out with the youth and see what's going on and see what they're doing. And I thought it would be also an encouragement to them. And so I go down there and I'm talking to some of the parents and some of the youth leaders, and the youth are just talking as we're eating before they get into like their session, just start talking about life and the word. And I started having a conversation with two of the young men. I learned that they love social media and they had gotten into different design work. One wants to be an engineer, and then there's others that were doing YouTubes and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm like, all right, well then you need to be on a social media team. Like, why are you playing? Why didn't I know this? And so one of them actually wanted to be a part of the social media team. So I was like, yes, I can, teach you and we can figure it all out. He actually started on the social media team. And when he started on social media team, because we're in both different generations, I had to understand how he talked and how he viewed things. And he had to understand how I talk and view things. So on the front end, it takes more time. But on the back end, once you teach and figure each other out and understand what you can do, what you can't do, and just teaching and learning and growing together, then you're able to do some wonderful things. So over the next few months, he'll be able to take on some things. And he's in middle school. And so I was thinking during that time, I'm like, we need to integrate a little bit more. And so during the youth day, I was telling one of the youth leaders, we need to implement and we need to put the youth and incorporate them more in our worship service when it comes to the different, the welcome and prayer and the song leading, just different things that they do on a regular basis. We need to be able to incorporate them in all of these different pieces. And so we're currently, just working through that, and having at least even one each Sunday relieves also an adult that can do it. And so it just brings on the family aspect. And, if the parents are doing this kind of ushering, then one of their kids could be the ones, because we know for sure they're going to be there that week, right? Then one of the kids can be the one that does this. Our People Growth Discipleship Workbook is available for purchase on Amazon. Our 3 pillars are get your mind right, get your ministry right, and get your church right. This workbook is designed for new members and those who need a reset with God, transition from being spectators to disciples for the kingdom. If you want to check out the full system to see if it works for your congregation, check out the link in the show notes to learn more. And so it incorporates everybody into the worship at all times, but then on youth day, they all get to participate in everything. And so when God gave me Psalm 71, which I talk about in a previous episode, in the first episode of this season, about generational discipleship, I started jotting things down, and the thought of Youth Day started to come into my mind as well. And I started thinking about how generations can serve and what it looks like. And later I began to just process that particular document and expand it. And then based on what we do at South Central, whether it's regular or sporadic, it helped me to utilize how generations can serve. And so I started to think through, how could just this generation serve? How can this generation serve? How can, where are they in their spirituality, in their intellect, in their way they can serve? Like, where are they and what can they do? Which is why I call this episode InterGenerational Ministry Milestones. So those that are part of Gen Alpha, those kids would be, from birth to 12 at this time. Gen Alpha is those who are from the age of 1 to 12. They're going to be your babies, your toddlers, elementary school into middle school. And so I was thinking, okay, for those who are toddlers, into like pre-K, what can they do to serve? And I just started thinking about just some of the children at South Central. And my mom always shares, when they get their lesson, the second they see their parents, they share it with their parents. They share what they learn. And so I just put up here, share what they learn with their parents. Like, that's a part of their worship and their service, is in a sense teaching their parents, because that's in their mind, they're telling them what they were taught. And so that's an active community. Sharing with their parents is something that the kids can do. And then when I thought about elementary school kids, and this is just a working document, there's so much more that kids can do. And especially if you're like a youth leader, you could even share with me even more things. And you can even put it in, if you're watching on YouTube, put it in the comments. And you can put it in the comments anywhere else if you're listening to this by audio. But I was thinking through elementary, okay, they can share with their parents. By that time, they're sharing with their friends as well. They can help. They're serving on Youth Day. They can help with outreach. Anytime we go to the Helen Wright Women's Center every 6 to 8 weeks, there's a couple of times where we've had kids to share in the outreach. Also knowing if there's something that you want to do in the future at your own congregation, some places do require a waiver form, so just make sure you have that. But they can share in handing out food, in doing prayers with the ladies that are there. And so it's so much that those who are in elementary school can do. They can do other service projects. They can send out cards. I mean, they love arts and crafts. So utilizing what they already love to do to help serve someone else. They can be a part of the ushers, those who greet, those who pass out the communion packets. And they can do so many different things already, even in their youth. Even prayer, participating in prayer. There's something about kids and those in their youth that aren't tainted, that they believe. And there's something we can utilize that within them to also pray. And when it comes to those who are in middle school, again, it's growing. Share what they learn with their parents, with their friends. They can serve in the same capacities as those who are in elementary school. They can serve in different ministries for worship. So children's church, they can help with kids that are a little bit younger than them, because sometimes the teachers need different aids, so they can help with them. They can, again, continue to help with ushering. They can be a part of the praise team by the time they get to that middle school age. They can help with announcements. They can help with social media, with a social media ministry. They can also help even in Bible study. Depending on how your youth are parsed out, that can help in teaching the younger kids. My mom has had that happen with some of the kids that may be in middle school, elementary school. Sometimes when they come in together, they will help teach the younger kids the story. And so that's a way that Gen Alpha right now can be of service, not only when we come together, but also as a community, as we help with outreach and different efforts evangelistically that we have. And then we also have to remember that as the kids are growing from middle school going into high school, which we'll talk about Gen Z, being able to help them transition from a lot of topical stories about God to bringing in the relevancy of the Bible studies because of what they will start to endure and experience once they get to high school. Gen Z is around the age of 13, beginning from 13 to 28, right at the end of middle school or going into high school, and our young adults. The high schoolers can do the exact same thing we just talked about for the middle schoolers. They also can participate on top of that in communion. leading communion, evangelizing with the community, being a part of the small groups that we have. They may do something different. Kids and youth may do something totally different. But if we're going to continue to have intergenerational or begin intergenerational pieces of our congregations, then being a part of those small groups and being able to share their experiences is a great thing. Even being a part of the streaming online, we have high schoolers that work with the tech team. And so that's another way that during that age range, because they are digital natives, they can help with the stream when things maybe have gone wrong. There's been a couple of times where there are kinks in the system or something happened, and it was a high schooler that knew what to do. So utilize your high schoolers. They understand technology, even if they're not experts in it. They understand it because it's intuitive for them. And so those who were young adults, so those who were coming out of high school and are young adults, can serve in all the same capacities. But then adding on the discipleship classes that we have, going into the people growth discipleship and the church growth evangelism and the follow me curriculum, they can get into some heavier and deeper discipleship beyond the classroom settings that they have for Sundays and Wednesdays. I think it also helps for kids to not be prodigals when they find value, when they see that they've been able to work when they're younger and then been able to serve the Lord once they get in high school and serve the Lord in these different ways, and that we continue to have these relevant conversations with them, because transitioning from the kid to the high schooler to the high schooler to the adult, my book, Pathway to Patience, How to Give God Control So You Can Fulfill Your Ministry, is great for personal devotion, small groups, and churches. But don't just take my word for it. Ira Booker says, "Oh, how you are teaching us through your life how to trust God while walking through our written life by God right into our ministry to bring glory to God." Or Dr. Nicholas Glenn, who says, "If you ever found yourself in the balance of self-will versus God's will, this book will be a great benefit to you." Or Tiffany Malone, who says, "This book is a combination of open honesty, personal testimony, and biblical truth, all bound together in a how to let go and let God manual." Now go ahead and get your copy on Amazon today. We need to be able to have relevant conversations to help them transition from one to the next and having honest conversations. And so having that be a part of the discipleship as well as they're graduating or as they're going from a kid to a young adult to an adult and all of that. So I believe that is an important part that sometimes we are missing. And Brother Stacy Jones talks about that as well in our podcast that we have. And so when it comes to the millennials can do everything that we just read, from Gen Alpha to Gen Z. They can work in every ministry. They can start to have leadership roles, being ministry leaders, being deacons, and even on the back end, elders. So those millennials would be 29 through 44. And so by this time, they would have been working in church for a while. They're recognizing how they can be of service. They're able to be a part of ministries, being able to give their ideas with ministries and just cultivate the landscape from child to adult. And so utilizing millennials in every ministry, in leadership roles, as ministry leaders, as deacons, and even as elders for some that are even more matured in those 40s is a possibility. And then with Gen X, those are 45 to 60, again, can do the same things and also be elders. Boomers, the same and the same and the same and the same. The silent generation, the same. And so this just starts to open our mind and get our juices flowing as to what a church can look like when everybody plays, when everybody serves, when everybody is able to worship the Lord through whatever piece they have, whether it is sharing with their parents or being the elder or being the pastor or being the teacher, or being part of the tech team or the social media team in middle school. Everybody gets to serve the Lord, and there are so many different capacities that the Lord can be served. And so I hope this has gotten some of you all's juices flowing as to, what about this? And we've done this with our youth. Let's do this. We've done this with our young adults. Let's try this out. Just recognizing the opportunities that we have when it comes to serve, because everybody does get to play. Everybody has to be instructed. everybody has to be able to do, and everybody has to be able to mature. And as you continue to integrate the different generations in the acts of service, then we can become even tighter and even better of what it means for Gen Alpha to transition to more service for the Lord, from Gen Alpha to Gen Z, and what it means to transition more to being as millennials. And of course, the generations will continue to grow and change and all of, or we can actually begin to implement them into every aspect as we tighten up our development through discipleship and help with the lifelong sanctification. This makes me think a little bit about Samuel and Eli and how they came into community. And we know the story. A lot of us know the story and some of us don't. But Hannah was married to Elkanah and she could not have kids. And she really, really, truly wanted to have a child. And so she went to go to the house of the Lord to pray. And she prayed in her heart for God to give her a son and that the Lord would give her a son. And so Eli said, well, may the Lord grant to you what you have prayed for and what you have asked. And she ended up giving birth to Samuel. God heard her. And so she says that when she has this child, that she will give that child back to the Lord. And that's exactly what she does. Eli lives at the house of the Lord in Shiloh while he is ministering and is a prophet and is doing his duties as one of the leaders of Israel. And so during this time, Eli is growing. And so by the time he hits around the age of 2 or 3, once he is weaned, then she goes ahead and dedicates him to the Lord and gives him to Samuel to now grow up in the house of the Lord and be dedicated to the Lord. And so Eli showed him how to minister to the Lord, the different duties that they did as the priest, and how to understand the Lord. And we see this interaction of getting acquainted with the Lord. So he not only gets acquainted with Samuel with Eli over time and over the years, but Eli also helps Samuel to understand the voice of God and what God wants and the will of God. Eli and Samuel had this relationship, but then Samuel gains a relationship through Eli's discipleship. And so he wasn't acquainted with the Lord, but he does have an experience where Eli helped Samuel to understand the voice of the Lord. They were asleep and Samuel was being called by God. He was called by God 3 times and he's thinking, oh, this must be my father Eli, because they referred to each other as this father-son bond that they had. And by the 3rd time, Eli's like, oh, that's the Lord. So Eli tells Samuel, it's the Lord. Respond to him that the servant is here. He's listening. And then God tells Samuel this prophetic word about Eli and his family. And so Samuel drew closer to God through that interaction. He recognized that God was putting him in a position as a prophet, not that he would be over Samuel at the time, but that he would be an actual prophet because God had directly spoken to him and he had given him a word about Eli and his family. He tells Eli about the word. And Eli, he already knew. Eli helped Samuel recognized what it meant to deal with people, not only how to recognize God's voice, the intimacy, the acts of worship that they would have done in the tabernacle, but also how to handle the people that they were leading at the time. And so he not only got the relational aspect with the people, but relational aspect with God. And so he understood God's laws. God continued to grow a relationship with him through these prophetic words as well. So it wasn't just the law, it was through the words that God had given him. He became a prophet for Israel later on in his life after Eli had died, and he grew closer and closer to the Lord. And that was a part of his becoming a leader. And so we see these ministry milestones of when he was 3 years old and given to Eli, he would not have known what to do and how to do it. But little by little, based off of his age and based off of what he needed to do and handle and understand, Eli was showing him, you do this for the administration of the Lord. You do this in the service of the Lord. You do this in worship of the Lord. And then he got to a point where he could hear from God himself, and he continued to help him with his relationship with God and what it means to be a part of the priestly family and what it means to lead Israel, but also help him develop into the leader that God was calling him to be. It's so important that we recognize that every generation, everyone has something in them that they can do, even if it's small. And it doesn't mean a child has to be baptized to be able to serve. We see it plenty of times with the Lord as people are following him. Some are just following him and they never understand. And some are following him and they get to the point where they understand. His own disciples were following him, not fully understanding, not fully believing, and sometimes doubting. And so we have to be more, not so rigid in our thinking that if a child isn't baptized at 11, they can't work on a social media team. If a child isn't baptized, they can't work, they can't do the announcements. All of us who are in the congregation, who are families in the congregation, need to be able to work in the service of the Lord. There will become a time in that child's life where they say, I accept my Lord and Jesus as my Savior. But even at our congregation, the youth have been working all throughout the different pieces. And then we see one gets baptized and another gets baptized, another gets baptized. They're not qualified right then and there. They were qualified to serve, even when they were younger. And then we recognize when God is starting to work in them more and more, and they decide, you know what, I do believe. And the things that I may have doubted before, things I didn't understand before, I've at least come to a point where I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. So don't dictate all acts of service as only those who are baptized. There are certain things that only those who are God's children, we know for sure eternally that you're not going to have somebody who's a pastor who is, we know that doesn't make any sense, right? We're not going to have somebody who is a minister. It doesn't make any sense. We're not going to have somebody who's a ministry leader. No, but there are other ways that everybody in the community can actually serve, from the youngest to the 2-year-old to the 92-year-old. And we need to recognize that God is calling us to disciple all generations and help them with those ministry milestones and help them with their understanding of Christ. And so they hit that milestone of becoming a believer and walking with Christ and being raised anew. So I'm hoping this has been helpful for you all to recognize that from leadership down, what each generation can do, what are the possibilities of each generation. It doesn't have to be a daunting task. It could just be simple things, and then all of a sudden you find yourself a year, 2 years from now, and the full family is incorporated into the service and the worship of our Lord God. And I think that helps all generations to feel valuable, to be seen, and recognize that they too can help at whatever age, but also helping people to recognize the love of God, the love of community, and to help them draw nearer to Christ so that they too can be saved. Thank you for watching and listening to the People Growth Discipleship Podcast. Don't just grow your church, grow your people. Please like, comment, and share this conversation to help us reach a wider audience. And go ahead and do it today, because tomorrow is too late to be great.